What you doing, boy?
I said, boy.
I am the mid-grade masochist. Welcome back. Here we are with another installment, Trough-Born Son. We got another story here written by Matt Demirsky. I believe that's how it's said.
It's a pretty cool name.
Appreciate you writing this story, Matt.
Good job. Great name.
The title is A Particular Kind of Madness. I'd always known that my great-grandma was an orphan, but in late October of last year, she decided to tell me the truth about what happened to her family. We were visiting for her birthday. It was a tradition in our household, a road trip we knew in the back of our minds we'd take only a few more times. She was turning 98, so that was just the cold, hard truth of the matter. In my childhood, the journey to central Iowa had been a fun and light-hearted affair. But now my brother and parents could only maintain strained politeness as we met up and hit the road together. Each of us knew that this trip might be our last. For several hours, we drove through vast open farm fields that stretched from horizon to horizon. My great-grandma's house was down a narrow dirt road off a wide dirt road off a gravel tractor lane. As a city boy, it was...
City boy! It's so great I have
As a city boy, it was, more or less, the most remote possible dwelling I could imagine. She was born there and lived her entire life there, and soon would, well...
die there. It doesn't say that, but I had to.
As we parked in an open, muddy rectangle and stepped out to stretch our legs, the consistency of the place surrounded me. Every single year of my life, this house and its land had been exactly the same. The sky was open blue, the earth was a sea of waving gold, and the wind was a smooth river of cool warmth. There was never anything to mar those three pillars of sensory experience except the house, the barn, and defunct old tractor, and the bell. The bell was a simple thing raised high on an old metal crook. It sat out in the fields about a quarter mile from the house, serving as a measure of the wind. If a storm was coming, the bell was supposed to ring, a necessary precaution in tornado country. The only problem was the bell and its crook had rusted over a long time. Every time I got out of the family van from age 5 to age 26, I glanced in that direction and felt a sense of unease as my gaze fell upon that decayed artifact. This time, at age 27, I looked over and saw that the bell had been scraped and polished clean of rust. It glinted in the sunlight, practically daring me to look at it. I followed the family inside while struggling with the feel of dread that I couldn't articulate. Who had cleaned the bell, and why? I tried to stop thinking about it as we gathered in the kitchen and said our hellos. My great-grandma was making tea and shooed off our attempts to help. She was a frail woman for whom movement was difficult, but she never let that stop her.
The Wi-Fi password is on a note in the living room,
She told us with unquestionable authority.
Go stare at your phones and the tea will be ready in a moment.
My brother and I did as we were told, but my parents turned on the television instead of looking at their phones. For a few minutes we stayed in our separate worlds, only returning to the present when my great-grandma brought in the tea. And we had a nice time. That night, when everyone else was long asleep, I happened to open my eyes and see a glow under the door of the guest room I shared with my brother. Okay, so let's stop right there, and does this seem familiar for some reason?
Yeah, I mean, like...
right there, like, I hit a wall and was like, wait a second, what story am I in right now? It seems like people always have glows under their doorsteps.
Dude, looking under a door can be kind of creepy, man. You know? Or, like, just looking at a door entryway. If I leave the closet door open, I'm like, And then I'm like, do I want to close the door so I don't see someone standing there?
I'm putting a towel across the bottom of the door every single time so I don't have to look at the light moving around. I don't want to know if there's somebody standing outside my door. You know what I mean?
It's going to be awesome if, like, the entire story just surrounds the idea of, like, who the fuck cleaned the bell?
Who cleaned the bell?
Who did it?
It just ends. Like, we don't know who cleaned the fucking bell. My parents were in a different room and would not see the same light, so it was up to me to investigate. Quietly, as so not to wake him, I crept out and down, finding my great-grandma still awake. She sat in her big jade leather chair, her gaze on the television. She asked me without looking my way.
You don't fall for this stuff, do you?
What, like ads?
She pointed her thin little arm at the nearby couch.
Sit.
I sat.
I'm going to tell you a family secret.
She said softly, finally looking my direction.
It's for you and possibly for your brother, but not for your parents. Do you understand?
I didn't, not fully, but I nodded.
You know, I was an orphan for a time, born in this house, lived with my family, and then raised by an uncle after it happened.
But she didn't wait for my nod.
I was 10 years old that night. It was my birthday. My mother had gotten me a small cake about the size of your fist.
I always measure things by the size of my fist. Fuck.
I looked forward to that cake every year since we didn't exactly have sweets bounding about back then. It was 11 cents, so rather expensive, but my mother got one for every one of us on our birthdays, no matter what she had to scrimp or save. All year long, I saw Mary get her cake in January, Arthur get his cake in March, Eleanor in June, Clarence in July, then Ruth a week after Clarence. Then it was months and months until me, the odd one out, on October 29th. I was so excited for that cake as the days rolled closer, as the morning dawned, as the hours inched by. I hopped around the house like a bunny rabbit. But I wasn't allowed to eat it until well after supper.
So, first off, awesome Irish grandma voice. I love it. It's very, very good. I heard a little bit of Irish.
Really
good.
put some stuff into perspective for you, man. Money's
Yeah.
money, inflation's a thing, 11 cents. So you're like, what is 11 cents? So that must have been like, substantial at the time. But like this kid was ecstatic for a cake and thought about it all goddamn year.
You could buy like 1,000 cakes, you know?
Yeah, they're getting like the cake the size of her fist. So they're not sharing it. So everybody gets their own cake.
Isn't that considered a cupcake? Like the size of your fist? I think that would be probably a better way to describe it.
I would think so. What she said, she was 10.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, exactly like the size of a fucking cupcake. And it's just like, man, I live for this cake.
I stared at the clock, so I know, yes, that one on the mantle there, the brass and chrome one, same one. But I stared at the clock, so I know. Night fell at 6:41. That was the moment bright orange stopped glinting off the clock, and my mother rose to light the lamp. I looked up at her. Now? She smiled and shook her head. My brothers and sisters complained in a chorus of support for me, but she just shook her head at them. Too soon, she'll ruin her supper. Father came in from the fields not long after that, dirty and tired as all get out. He ate in silence while we chattered endlessly about what type of cake it would be. Under the frosting, who knew? It might be raspberry, vanilla, or even chocolate. We grew silent as Father neared the cleaning of his plate, an event which would mark the end of supper. 4 pieces of meat and bread remained, then 3, then 2, any moment now. He stopped at the last piece, holding it unmoving about the remaining dollop of gravy. We turned our heads. It was the bell. The bell was ringing out in the fields. Father grunted, then put the last piece of his food back on his plate before rinsing. He opened the front door. We braced ourselves for the wind, but none came. He spat on and held up a finger to the night air and shook his head. He moved back into our lamplight and sat. Arthur asked, "Is it gonna storm?" Mary asked, "Is there gonna be a tornado?" My mother shook her head and smiled at us and told us not to worry. No wind meant no storm, but the bell kept ringing. My father dipped his last piece of food in the gravy and prepared to eat it despite the constantly ringing bell, but then he sighed and put it back down. He motioned to Clarence. Clarence was the oldest, so he understood. He was nearly a man himself, and tying the bell would be no problem. He grabbed a candle, protected the flame with his hand, and headed to the open front door. My brothers and sisters and I piled up to the window, opening it. We found nothing but absolutely still, chilly air. We watched his little spot of light move around the house and into the fields to the direction of the bell. The clanging metallic sound stopped finally, and the candle's little flame hovered next to it for a solid minute. "Why is he taking so long to tie it?" Ruth asked. Eleanor suggested, "Maybe he's having trouble making a knot. Knots are tough." We watched for another minute or two before, and I know how this sounds. The little flame in the distance began to rise, slowly, smoothly, straight up. We followed it with our eyes, exclaiming the entire time as it moved out of sight beyond the roof overhang. The bell began ringing again. "His knot must have come loose," Arthur said. Our parents came to look at our insistence, but there was nothing to be seen by then. Father motioned to Arthur, happy to help out. Arthur grabbed a full lamp rather than a candle. He hurried out the front door, around the house, and into the fields. While we watched from the window, the lamp was easier to see, and we were absolutely certain he reached the crook. As the lamplight hovered there, the bell stopped ringing. At that point, we had no reason to think anything was amiss. Maybe the wind had just blown a wisp of burning candle, stirring up into the sky, and Clarence had gotten lost in the dark. He would see the lamplight, find Arthur, and would come back. The rising little flame we'd seen had just been a fluke. Only problem was, staring out into the autumn night, we still felt no wind at all. We stared at that unmoving light for a strangely long period of time. What was he doing out there? Was he calling for his brother? Why couldn't we hear him, if so? Our parents looked away for a moment, and in that instant the lamp went out. We children bleated, but by the time they glanced back, there was nothing to see. There was only darkness. The bell began ringing again. My father began grumbling, but there was no more sons to be sent out. He narrowed his eyes with thought. He handed Ruth, the oldest girl among us, our main lamp.
Wait a minute, so this fucking bell's ringing. Dad's just like sending the kids out one by one, like, all right, go see if you can stop that bell, and then the kids aren't coming back.
Like what a piece of shit.
I worked in the field all day. I ain't gonna stop no bell.
I had you and I could sacrifice you if I pleased.
Like something's taking the kids. And this little girl's like, where's my goddamn cake?
The whole entire time, she don't give a shit.
Shit's getting weird.
Our mother laughed. "Ruth, be a dear and go find your silly brothers." Ruth was a little hesitant, but she accepted the lamp, leaving us in the darkness without it. She headed out of the house and into the fields. The lamp was brighter, and we could actually see her carrying hand and her white pajamas in a small lit halo. On the way there, she regularly called out, "Clarence, Arthur, are you two lost?" About halfway to where the other two lights had stopped, her calls went instantly silent. Mid-sentence, "Clarence, Arth." It wasn't that she'd given up on yelling. The sound reached us had simply stopped completely. We could still see her carrying the lamp, still see her hand and pajamas, still see her turning this way and that. She even raised the house lamp near her face, and we saw her shouting into the darkness. We just didn't hear anything. Nothing except the constantly clanging bell, growing faster in pace and louder in urgency. Mary, Eleanor, and I looked up at our parents with fearful gazes. My father shook his head, speaking out for the first time that night. "So there's wind out there after all. The air is like a river inside an ocean. It's moving fast out there, carrying her voice away, but we can't feel it here." My mother seemed very worried. She nodded and accepted that. We saw her accepting it, so we gulped and believed it too. We all glued our eyes to that open window. Ruth reached the bell, and in that stronger light, it entered our view unmoving at the exact same time we heard it stop ringing. Ruth looked this way and that, clearly concerned. She seemed to silently yell a time or two before moving closer to the motionless bell. A half-tied rope hung from its crook, an indication that someone had attempted to tie it, but we couldn't see Clarence or Arthur anywhere near her. She put the lamp down on the ground to free her hands for tying the rope the rest of the way, but that mostly hid the light among the low-lying, recently harvested stalks. We waited, breaths held. The air held in my lungs started to burn. At long last, we were forced to breathe again. Ruth's light continued to sit there, barely visible between the broken plants. "What's taking so long?" Mary asked. Eleanor said, "I hope she's all right."
Father told us she's fine. Damn kids are just playing a game with us.
Our mother nodded in agreement. "Eleanor, go fetch your sister, will you?" Eleanor shook her head. "No way, it's scary out there." "It's just a game. You're not playing games with us too, are you?" "No," Eleanor gulped. "Then go get your sisters and brothers. Tell them to come back in." It was pitch black out there and almost the same inside with us, save for our lone candle. Trembling, Eleanor took our last candle and crept into the night, scooting alongside the house to stay close to us as possible. Shakily she called, "Ruth, Arthur, Clarence, this isn't funny anymore." Now it was we who sat in the dark. As Eleanor began to move further away with our last light, we tensed. Father eyed the open front door, and Mother saw...
Oh, dude. You got the load dropped on you there. I kind of feel guilty.
It's not your fault. I'm like, I'll be the grandma. She's like, "I will tell a very long
Then
story."
all of a sudden, she just hijacks the shit out of everything.
Let me read this journal entry from 1914.
Yeah, with all these old ass words and fucking phrases and shit that we don't normally say.
Oh man.
In an Irish grandma's voice the whole time.
Yeah, it's funny too, because like the grandma sounds like that, and then the dad's like, "What you gonna do, boy? What you gonna do, boy? Quit fiddling in the dark with them flashlights.
Send another piglet out to get slaughtered.
I did my work for the day. Y'all get sacrificed and whatnot."
Father eyed the open front door, and Mother softly moved to close and latch it. I wondered what they meant by that move, because how were the others supposed to get back in? I suppose they'd unlatch it if anyone came back and knocked. Mother moved away from us in search of more candles. Through it all, the bell kept ringing out in the dark. Increasingly scared, I held Mary's hand tightly and yelled out the window, "Be careful, Ellie!" She must have happened to cross that invisible silent threshold at that moment, because she turned around in surprise and stepped closer. "I heard your voice go quiet, but there's no wind. Papa's wrong." She stepped away again. "See, when I pass this point, She held up the candle to show us that her mouth was still moving, but we heard nothing. Come to think of it, her hair wasn't moving. We hadn't seen Ruth's pajamas billowing in any wind. I asked Father, "What's doing that? What's making it quiet out there?"
"It's just a game." God damn it, fuck you, Dad.
It's just a damn game.
He's totally like anti nothing wrong's happening, where obviously something is happening.
This is probably one of them goddamn TikTok trends. It's just a game.
Yeah, 1920 TikTok trend. 1920 TikTok trend. Unreal. I just imagine this bell, the bell on this crook is just like ding 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 at this point, like just absolutely obsessively ringing. I would, oh man, imagine what that would do to your mind.
This is like that cinnamon challenge Frankie died from. It's just a game.
Father insisted. They're all lying. She's just... I'm sorry. He's literally seeing his kids go out there and be completely silent. There's no wind. He sticks his hand in the air. The bell's ringing.
This must be a Snapchat filter.
No, that shit doesn't exist. Fuck you, Dad.
They're all lying. She's just pretending to make noise so it looks like she's being silenced.
Eleanor reached the bell. Father's grip on my shoulder squeezed to nearly painful. She reached down for the lamp that Ruth had left, lifting it with one hand and holding the candle with the other. She approached the clanging bell. See, Mary whispered to Father, the candle's not going out even though she's not protecting the flame. There's no wind out there.
But the bell is ringing,
He said gruffly.
so there is wind. I'm a simple man. If the bell don't, the bell ring, the wind. If there ain't no ring, it ain't no ring.
Ain't no ring, ain't no wind.
Ain't no ring, ain't no wind, boy.
Dude, now you're going back through Irish grandma voice and big burly dumbass voice.
I'm having a mental breakdown.
Yeah, you're not gonna be the one to sleep tonight after this.
Eleanor kept looking left and right as if she'd heard something. Slowly, she reached the bell, which was hanging unmoving from the crook. But we could still hear it ringing. Next to me, Mary began to cry.
It's a game.
Father...
Oh, he only knows how to say like one line. Like it's
You
a
know
game.
what?
It's still a game.
I kind of wonder, though, if he's scared.
Yeah, he's doing that man card thing where show no fear. Like 1920s, that's what it's gonna be like, you know?
Facts are facts. No ring, no bell, no wind. It's a game.
Father said angrily.
It's just a game they're playing.
Eleanor threw the lamp at something in the darkness. We saw the lamp crash, shatter, and go dark, but heard nothing. She raced towards us, candle in hand, but the flame went out because of her haste. We waited to hear her approaching or screaming, but nothing followed. The bell continued to clang. We waited in terrified silence. Mother returned with a candle for each of us, and we sat vigil at the window. Nothing and no one moved. For hours, the bell clanged without wind. The night remained pitch black. The bell clanged and clanged and clanged, driving deeper into our ears with each passing minute. Near midnight, we broke. Father was beyond agitated.
Mary, go find your brothers and sisters.
Dude, first of all, I'm surprised that, like, when she threw the light, her dad wasn't like,
God damn it, that's my best one.
Yeah, I gotta go out there and beat her and then come back and send out another kid. Like,
they're sitting there till midnight. Like, it was
Dude.
6:41 when this started.
this is 6 hours in.
Yeah. Well, no, he came in, ate dinner. It's probably 7. It's at least 4 hours.
Oh man, just the bell ringing for hours would be absolute. It would make you insane.
You're a father. I'm a father. There's no way in hell I'm sending any of my kids out to do this. I would be out there myself looking to see what's going on.
Right.
I might have sent the oldest boy out. I'm like, go ahead, go. Not a big deal.
But I would have took a rocket launcher with me out there.
Oh my
At
God.
that point,
Father was beyond agitated.
Mary, go find your brothers and sisters.
No, she cried. I'm not going out there. Mother glared at her. You have to. This game has to stop. Urged on by both of them, Mary burst into tears and climbed out the window. Holding her small candle, she inched out into the fields. Her sobs went quiet as she passed that same point out in the darkness. Her flame reached the bell and the ringing stopped. Her flame snuffed out. We held our breaths. The bell began ringing again. Father clenched his fist.
Go.
I turned and saw him looking at me. I suddenly realized that I was the only child left in the house, and I felt horribly alone. Everything in me shrieked against the thought of going out into that cursed night. No! My mother wavered in place, no longer adamantly in line with my father. She began to cry too.
What are you doing?
He demanded.
It's just a game. There's nothing to be scared of.
She said she's adopted, or she was an orphan.
no, she was an orphan.
She was an
Okay,
orphan.
so, yeah.
Is this how she becomes an orphan?
Apparently, it looks like everybody is going to go out there. So she's refusing to go out, apparently. This is the last child, it says. Yeah, so...
Unbelievable.
Unreal. Unbelievable.
What are you doing?
He demanded.
It's just a game. There's nothing to be scared of.
She screamed and demanded, "Why do you keep saying that? Why have I been helping you do this?" He grabbed her and shouted in her face,
Because we haven't been sending our children out to their deaths, that's not what's happening.
She pushed his hands away and ran for the window. Pushing past me, she tumbled out and ran screaming toward the clanging bell. Not out of fear of father, but out of terror for her children. "Arthur, Clarence, Ruth, Eleanor, Mary, for God's sake, where are you?" He growled and leapt out after her, yelling,
We didn't kill them. Everything is fine.
They both continued shouting until they passed that point in the dark, and all went silent except for the bell. Twice more, it stopped ringing, and twice more, it began again. In panic and terror beyond reason, I closed and lashed the window and pushed all of the furniture against every entry to the house. I curled into a cupboard, holding the last candle up to my face as it slowly melted its way down towards my fingers. I was alone. Somehow I was alone. We'd all seen the danger and stared right at it as it happened, and one by one they'd all gone out there anyway. I'd been surrounded by a full band of siblings my entire life, and now I was completely and utterly alone in a house in the middle of nowhere. By the length of my candle, it was 3 a.m. when the knock came at the door. I trembled, but did not make a sound. The knock sounded again 40 heartbeats later. It was louder this time. I shook, holding my candle tight. The third knock was more like a tremendous crash or kick, and I heard the door explode inward. 60 heartbeats of silence passed, and then the floorboards creaked. Something in me told me to put out the candle for fear of it being seen through the cracks in the cupboard, but I didn't care. Not darkness. I couldn't handle darkness. I would scream if I did, so I kept it lit. Slowly, quiet steps moved through the house. Whoever it was seemed to be pausing and listening at times. At others, they would rush forward to a random spot in a sudden frenzy, then stop abruptly. 400 heartbeats after that, the bell began ringing again. But this time it rang from inside the house. It rang from the kitchen. It rang from near the bed. It rang outside my cupboard, clang. 10 feet away, clang. 5 feet away, clang. Right up against the cupboard door, and then it opened.
What opened it? The bell opened it?
We're gonna find out. But
Is this the bell walking through the house? Is this the entity that's controlling the bell? Here's the thought. They all went out there. Once they tried to stop the bell, that's whenever they disappeared. It's almost like a lure. Like it's luring them out. Whenever they try to stop it, it must take them into like a different parallel universe or something like that. Or send them away, or maybe they just disappear somehow. But that's pretty crazy.
It's a pretty big mindfuck.
I sat expectantly, mouth open and eyes wide, as I waited for my great-grandmother to continue. After a bit, I realized that was it.
But what'd you see?
She shook her head.
That's not the point. I'm here, so obviously I survived, and a young man like you doesn't need to know what horrors walk this world outside the paved cities of a man.
Gulping, I asked,
You're not just pulling my leg? This really happened?
Yes.
Her gaze went distant by television light.
But here's what I want to tell you, and what you should tell your brother.
And then there's like another story for the old lady to read coming up
Oh,
here.
man.
Man, I dodged a bullet on this one, didn't I?
Oh, my God.
That thing that opened that cupboard door and stared at me from the dark, the thing that hoped to wait out my candle before the coming of dawn, had a bell tied to one of its teeth with a blood-soaked rag. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but god damn it, here it is.
Absolute describing it, yeah.
Had a bell tied to one of his teeth with a blood-soaked rag, such that it would clang when its mouth was open for hunting. Somehow, someway, some heroic poor soul managed to tie a warning bell to that thing before they died. We heard that warning bell all night long, and yet my entire family walked out there one by one. We didn't listen because we didn't want to listen. My father knew what he was doing halfway through, but he didn't want to accept what he'd already done. So he did even worse to continue living the lie.
I narrowed my eyes.
What are you saying?
She grabbed my hand briefly.
Fear will tell you to put the candle out, but your head will tell you to keep it lit. Don't give in to fear. You keep it lit. You'll get through this.
Turning my head, I became aware of a sound in the distance.
Is that the bell? I was so caught up I didn't notice. How long has that been ringing?
She just clenched her fist and turned back to the television. What an ending. Wow. I'll tell you what, that was a pretty cool story. I don't think I've ever read anything like that. It's definitely unorthodox for sure.
The whole like it's a creature with a bell tied around his tooth. I feel like if you're getting into the mouth of a beast and you're able to like tie a sturdy tie and get a bell,
Yeah, you had too much time.
you probably could have killed the fucking thing.
I think that this is just opinionated, obviously. I think it was a good story, but I think the writer probably should have just left that small piece out, and it would have just had so much more hanging on the story. You know what I mean? Instead of
100 billion%.
yeah, you went from supernatural to horror by saying those couple sentences of the monster with the bell on its tooth, and it could have just been unknowing and been way more creepier.
My breakdown is A, I wish the cupboard door opened and there was nothing there, but her family's gone.
Yeah.
B, get rid of the fucking bell.
Can you get rid of the bell?
I don't know.
Like,
but
what
do
happens
really-
when you go try to like cut it down and throw it into the woods?
And then like she was an orphan because of that, but she still
Yeah.
lived in that house. So like who took care of her? How did she still live there?
She must have just started taking care of herself, but
I wanted her to be like,
I ran into the cupboard and ate my goddamn cake.
I wanted her to get that cake so bad. Like
that's
she was
the
so
most
pumped about
devastating
that
part.
cake.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Poor kid
yeah.
waited all year for that cake. The dad's a fucking idiot. It almost makes you wonder, like, did he is there like a legend of like a creature that has a ringing bell in its mouth and he's like, that ain't it.
Or he's like, wonder how many of my kids I have to feed to this thing before it goes away. Maybe he knew about it the whole time. That's why he didn't go out, because he was fucking more scared than the kids were.
And then he chases after his wife.
She makes my meals.
Yeah.
I need my time.
I need to make them kids again.
Yeah, he's just making kids to feed to the beast.
Well, pretty cool story. Appreciate you guys hanging out and listening. I appreciate Trough-Born Son falling into the trap of doing all of the reading and cross-reading into different contexts there. I appreciate it. Great grandma voice.
Thanks,
Great grandma
man.
voice. I will catch you guys next time. I am the Mid-Grade Masochist. Farewell.